r/AskReddit. What was the worst decision you saw a friend or family member make? My mother, who is in her 70s and lives on social security, called me up and said she won $500 from Publishers Clearinghouse, which she enters all the time. I told her she did not win, then she said all she has to do is send them $6 for processing fees. I told her it's a common scam. The next day she said she charged $6 to her credit card. Poof. Goodbye money. That was many years ago. She still hasn't paid off the card. That sucks. $6,000 is a lot of money, especially for somebody on social security. Girlfriend works for an assisted living facility. Old folks are constantly getting scammed like this, and there's nothing they can do about it.
Claim your free AirPods today by clicking the first link in the description down below.
Auntie owned a successful pharmacy and got drunk one night and sold some prescription medication on the side for some money. Police found out and was stripped of her license. It got worse when questioned by police. She said it was for herself because she was suffering cancer, which she was not. With all of these accusations published in a prominent newspaper, life ruined, credibility ruined. My aunt ran a network of group homes for mentally disabled people. She had a shopping addiction. Bought a huge house and had an entire room filled with shopping bags and packages from QVC that she never even unpacked. Spoiled the crap out of her 5 kids and grandkid. We thought she was doing really well, but it turned out she was stealing government funding that was supposed to go to the homes. She ended up in the paper and everything. Had to sell everything, but never did any time. What was happening to the disabled residents? Were they being deprived of adequate services? If it's just embezzling government funds, I can still find some sympathy for the perpetrator. But if she was subjecting mentally disabled people to neglect and privation in the process, then I'm going to find it a lot harder. My dad, bless his heart, replaced a bad fuel line on our van with a piece of garden hose. We had a burnt down van 2 days later. Wow. Actual fuel lines from an auto parts store probably would have been cheaper. And obviously more effective. Definitely. But my family is white trash, so they do things differently. Gamble away $250k plus. It was painful watching him sell their beautiful huge home and rent a hitty apartment. My mom had a friend like this. He was married, owned a home, and had a successful landscaping business. He also loved to play craps. I once asked my mother how bad his gambling problems was. She told me that he had told her he had been up $50k and left the casino owing more than $50k in the same night. More than once. His wife left him and he ended up declaring bankruptcy. Now he works for $15/HR on a landscaping crew and is a runk. Holy hit, this describes my uncle pretty closely. Right down to the jobs. Also owned his own landscaping business. Pretty successful. Bought a large new built $800k home in California back in the late 90s when prices were not as insane. Drove a Lexus bought with cash. And a nice Acura for my aunt. But same hit as your mom's friend. My uncle had a gambling problem which got worse the more money he made. He would go to Vegas some weekends and blow thousands of dollars in just a few hours. He and my aunt started fighting constantly about his gambling because they were hemorrhaging money and had 2 young kids. Then they lost their house in 2008, largely because my uncle had no savings. I wonder why. He ended up getting arrested after he attacked my aunt with a knife during a drunken argument. Uncle went to jail. They got divorced. And landscaping business went under. After he got out, my uncle moved to Florida. Last I heard he works a low-paid construction job and lives in a rundown apartment complex. He also drives drunk constantly. An absolutely upstanding member of society. Some good news at least. He remarried a few years after. He has 2 more kids with the new wife. Doesn't pay child support for his previous 2 kids. Still gambles. But at least now he only has enough to gamble only $20.50 at a time. I feel so sorry for my cousins. Friend of my wife's was getting married. I have no idea why. Because every time I met her, the friend, all she did was itch about her fiancé. Well, one day she's complaining that her fiancé went out and bought a new car without consulting her, and the monthly payment was too much for them to afford. So, to get back at him, she bought her own new car. ? The marriage lasted 2 years and both cars got repaired. That just seems like the worst excuse possible to get a car. What the heck? Edit. How did this get so many upvotes? You guys are cool. ? Is the only correct response to that. A friend got drunk and got into a wreck driving home. He fled the scene on foot and ran all the way home. Cops picked him up at his house soon after. Things haven't been great for him since. Unethical as duck life pro tip. If you're drunk and smash your car and nobody got hurt, haul ass. Get sober and wait until you're arrested. You'll be brought in for fleeing a crash and not get a DUI. Brother married a one night stand, he got pregnant. Same. And now they are going through a nasty divorce. As my wife and I predicted years ago when he got married. It was pretty obvious to people not extremely close to them that they weren't really that compatible. We opposed him marrying her and it actually caused a rift in our family. Now he's actually come back around and realized his mistakes and our relationship is a lot better. Even my rather religious mother said it was a bad idea. A close friend from high school who had a full ride scholarship to a top 10 university decided that he wanted to drive home after a graduation party out in the middle of nowhere after spending the past 4 hours drinking. Countless people tried to stop him to grab his keys, but he got confrontational and left. He made it less than a mile down the road before wrapping his car around a tree. Instead of heading off to college at the end of the summer, he went to a long-term care facility. He died 4 years later. A life wasted because he thought he was okay to drive after drinking. Probably not the best way to handle someone like this. But a friend was doing the same thing before going into the military. Was being super aggro and demanding to drive. All of us were wrestling him and trying to force him to stop until our friend, who was the fat lovable runk of the group, came up to him with 2 bottles and told him to chug some booze before he left. FLD can drink, and the future military guy had a huge ego, so when FLD started chugging, military guy wouldn't stop till he did. 2 minutes later he was puking in the bathroom and we had his keys. Could have easily gone the other way though, and he could have sent an even more unk guy out on the road. We would pull a trick, but it worked. The person would be all like, no I'm fine, and everyone's trying to grab the keys or something. Then one of us, it was always someone different every time in our group, would be like, hey man, I'm less drunk than you are. Let drive. They give this person the keys and he would just walk away back inside the house. Even though they know the trick, they fall for it every time. Cousin, the new receptionist is so hot. And she's 18. Dude. Me, man. Don't do it. You're 24. Cousin, Emma, ask her out. I bet she bangs. Me, you bet she bangs? What, are we 12 still? A few days later. Cousin, dude, she's totally hot and we do it all the time. She's my GF now. Me, great. Whatever you do, don't knock her up. A few months later. Cousin, dude, she's pregnant. Me, well, I told you. Whatever you do, don't get mad. Cousin, we are getting married. A few years later. Cousin, things are rocky but. Me, don't say it. Cousin, we are having another kid so that'll help. Me, Fassipum. A few years later. Cousin, dude, this chick I met is so hot. And she's 22. Me, dude, you're married and got kids, and when you get caught you'll be sewed out with divorce and child support. Man, don't do it. A few months later. Cousin, the judge said it's okay if she won't let me see my kids. And I still have to pay more than I make in child support. Emma moved back in with my mom. Me, well, at least you can try to get back on your feet. Cousin, meth. That's a good idea. Also, at least my GF is hot. Me, you're dead to me. Lose my number. So many rock bottoms in that story and somehow keeps finding another low. The limit does not exist. Friend wanted to join the military. Got all his paperwork in and everything, and figured it was a done deal. Quit his well-paying job with good benefits, against everyone's recommendations. Went to the physical, and they found out he had psoriasis that he thought wouldn't be an issue, and he was barred from service. He is currently unemployed. Psoriasis keeps you out of service. Well hit. I'm saved from the draft. If we are ever desperate enough to reinstate the draft, I think pretty much every disqualifying condition will disappear. Hit. I have flat feet, and they let me in. My parents. My brother is into drugs, and when he was in high school, they told him if he could stay clean for a month, they'd buy him a dirt bike. He stayed clean for a month, so they bought him a brand new dirt bike, helmet, clothes, etc. He got high later that evening, and continued to get high and do drugs every day after. He ended up breaking the bike. But he's learned that he can manipulate my parents into buying or doing whatever it is that pleases him. Frustrating. Really. He's in his late 20s. And an absolute mess. I can see this turning into a cycle of use. Get promise of reward. Detox. Get reward. Relapse. Repeat. I hit you not. He relapses whenever he wants something, or no longer feels like working. My aunt one drained my grandma's bank account and left her kids with her, never coming home. Now, 17 years later, my nan is in poor health and she won't visit because she's afraid to be arrested. Edit, guys. You are way more upset by this than anyone in our family. It was almost 2 decades ago and $3,500. It's not worth the energy to hold the anger. Similar thing happened in my family. My grandfather was dying of cancer and had 1,600 acres of land that he wanted to distribute to the family. No one could agree on anything, so he decided to sell it all and divide the money up. On one of my grandfather's last days on earth, and while under heavy medication to where he was on another planet, and my crazy aunt goes to visit him with her boyfriend in hospice and starts handing him all of these papers to sign that gave her almost everything. This happened 6 years ago, and my mom is still fighting it in court, and there seems to be no end considering my aunt is the most manipulative sociopath I know. Why does this always ducking happen? Why do I have to hear stories from every god damn person I know that some arsehole in the family pulls every sneaky trick in the book to get the entire inheritance to themselves? Is money really so important that you're willing to duck over your family and burn all those bridges? I just don't get it. The decision to do nothing. My brother is 38 next month. He's never moved out of my parents' house. Never had a girlfriend. When my dad died 3 years ago he quit his job and has been mooching off my mom ever since. My uncle is the same. Quit his job around 28. Hasn't worked since. He's about 55 now. He lives alone. He's fat and smokes. Already had heart surgery. My grandfather pays for his medical insurance and gives him like $20,000 a year to live off of. I think his days mainly consist of watching TV, talking to family on the phone, and driving to McDonald's to sit in the parking lot and use their Wi-Fi. I visited his apartment once, and it was disgusting. Walls yellow from cigarette smoke. Garbage all over the floor. Sleeps on a mattress on the floor. He's a living example of what not to do for my entire family. Had a cousin like this. He met a lady at 40 years old that got him to turn his life around. He now has a child with her and he's an inspector for OSHA. Throwing away a knee grant for graduate research into mitochondrial DNAs and premed undergrad to become a pup play brony BDSM camgirl. Damn. I would have kept the grant and done the camgirl stuff as a side hustle. Hello. Have you heard the word of our Lord? Several years ago, right around the time that the word green was entering common parlance as a synonym for environmentally friendly, a friend of mine decided that she was going to do everything that she could to reduce her carbon footprint. It was a noble enough goal on its own, but unfortunately, this young woman wasn't the brightest knife in the cookie jar, and several of her decisions wound up doing more harm than good. For example, This friend and I once took an afternoon to visit one of those wholesaler warehouses, where I watched as she spent upwards of $200 on cases of bottled water. When I asked about that, reminding her that she was going green, I was treated to an explanation that made my head spin. "Oh. No. You see," she said to me, "this is actually better. Because you aren't wasting anything. You never have to use the faucet. And you can recycle the bottles." I didn't ask her what she planned to do about showering. Anyway, this should give you some idea of how the young woman's logical process worked. With that in mind, she could almost be forgiven for the dumbest decision that she made. As I mentioned, I had been the one to drive during our trip to the wholesaler, and my role as chauffeur had been prompted by the fact that my friend's own vehicle was out of commission. She had heard of biofuel gasoline made from corn, essentially, and decided that dumping corn oil into her tank would be a cleaner and more ecologically friendly option than fueling up like a normal person. Unfortunately, she had also heard that corn syrup contained more energy than oil. And, well, to make a long story short, she wound up having to pay for a complete flushing of her car's fuel system. Just to add insult to injury, the mechanic had apparently thought that someone had played a prank on her. TL. Doctor, a not very bright friend of mine syruped herself. Can you tell us more stories about this woman? Rap. I have dozens. Would you like to hear about the time we had an argument about my car's GPS? The day when we tried to bake a vegan cake? Or the evening when I allegedly destroyed her sound system? Edit. Okay. I'll tell you all of them. As I mentioned in the above story, the young woman in question had managed to knock her car out of commission by filling its tank with corn syrup. While this wasn't quite as bad as it might sound, we were both living in San Francisco at the time, and the city has virtually ubiquitous public transportation. It did mean that she was limited to places which buses and trains could access. As a result, when we were each invited to a get-together at Stinson Beach, which is well outside the city limits, it meant that I had to drive. Now, this was back in the days before smartphones, but GPS systems were already pretty common. I had received one as a gift, and although I hadn't put it to much use yet, I was eager to give the device a try. Unfortunately, my friend wasn't quite as comfortable with modern technology as I was, and when I announced my intention to rely on an electronic map, she voiced some concerns. "How does it know where we are?" she asked. "What if it thinks we are somewhere else?" "That can happen," I admitted, "but it's usually pretty accurate. A satellite tracks us in real time." For some reason, this was the wrong thing to say. The young woman immediately insisted that we turn around and print out physical directions. When I tried to reassure her that the GPS would work fine, she got even more upset. "No. This is stupid." She pointed out the window at something. "Use your eyes. It won't work." Given that I was driving, I could only glance in the direction that she indicated. "What is it?" "I don't see anything." With an audible sigh of exasperation, she explained, "It's cloudy outside. The satellite can't see us." That was about the time when our other two passengers, who had been silent until then, started laughing. TL. Doctor, overcast skies thwart orbiting spies. Despite what that tale about the GPS might lead you to believe, my friend wasn't quite the Luddite that she sometimes seemed to be. In fact, she absolutely loved technology, but only when it applied to music. She had a top-of-the-line stereo system in her apartment, speakers that could shake a person's bones, and a record player that would have been the envy of any hipster. What she didn't have was an iPod. But after her parents gave her one as a gift, she immediately set about connecting it to her existing setup. Since this story was noteworthy enough to remember, you can probably assume that something went wrong. I'll confess right away that nobody asked me to help with this situation.